see you.
Very good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. And hello, everyone who has taken time to join us this morning. I'm Brenda Harrington, and I'm here with Csaba Toth from ICQ Global. And I'm always excited to talk to Csaba, but today we're going to talk about something that I think we both feel is particularly timely. So Csaba, I don't know about you, but I feel like this is an exciting time to be in the leadership and professional development space. There's so much going on, but with all of the movement and the change, and I'll even say dissonance, I think there's huge opportunity to pull things apart and put them back together in a more effective and functional way. And as you and I have talked about many times in the past, that begins with healthy teams, right? And so I'm excited to talk to you today about what really helps us to develop high-performing, healthy teams. And one of the things I wanted to hear more about are these three forces that you talk about. So when you think about the three forces that make or break a team, can you tell us about that? What are those things?
Yes. So if you look at the leadership field, there's a lot of noise, a lot of big words, a lot of often virtue signaling. So there is the awareness that something needs to be done. But when you ask people, how do you actually measure things? How do you visualize them so you can optimize them? How do you know that you actually make progress, that the program you invested in is helping you or hindering you? Then there is silence. That's the problem with that. So if you look at, for example, the employee engagement results for the last 20 years in the US, companies spend billions and billions on the same programs, but the numbers are not really improving. Clearly, something is not working. If you cannot measure something, then probably you cannot optimize it, even if you have the best intention and common sense. So when we talk about the three invisible forces that make or break a team, that is psychological safety, the number one trait of high-performing teams, motivational drive, the desire and the ability to get things done, and also cognitive diversity, the only layer that has proven benefit in terms of performance. Now, you don't really see these forces, but you feel when something goes wrong. You can have a psychologically safe and motivated team, but if everybody thinks like you have the same tunnel vision as a team, just like as an individual. If you create psychological safety and you have a lot of smart people with the diversity of thought, but they are not motivated, then not much is going to happen. But if you have a lot of motivated people and it is still cognitively diverse, but there's no psychological safety, that is going to lead to anxiety, probably. So once we measure these things, we can make an informed decision and we can optimize that.
And so, when you talk about psychological safety, which I really put at the top of that list, right? And you think about measuring these things and really having actionable data to help to move people and systems forward. What are your thoughts about the receptiveness among individual members of teams and how you get them to buy into this process?
Do you mean the team members or we talk about companies?
The team members, the individuals who are impacted. Yes.
I think, first of all, we have to clarify what is psychological safety and what is not, because often the misconception is that psychological safety is physical comfort. So if I'm uncomfortable, there's no safety, and it's not the same thing. Psychological safety means that you can make a mistake, you can innovate, you can challenge, and also you can question somebody without feeling that they're going to take revenge or there's going to be any negative consequences. It doesn't mean that you're comfortable. We know that we need the right amount of friction. If there's not enough friction, then it's too slippery, too much friction, things get stuck. Growth happens when you have the right amount of friction. And you're right. First, people need to understand what is the benefit of having psychological safety and also what is the cost of not having it. And this is how we start, for example, the training. If that is not clear, then they're not going to put the work into it. And it's going to be, yeah, that's cute, that's nice, but that's not a priority. We are busy now because we have to make progress. And they don't realize that they are busy, but they are not making progress because of that.
Two things come to mind, and I don't mean to be cliche or by any means oversimplify this, but I think two things are important. It's important, one, to develop some level of comfort with being uncomfortable and recognize that that's part of the growth, right? And really being willing to take a risk and buy into this idea that, there's got to be some dissonance, some discomfort in order for us to move forward. It's good for people to think differently and have different ideas. So thank you for that. So when you think about the impact of these three elements on the stages of team growth, how does it impact the different stages of growth and the development of a team?
So when we measure these three invisible forces and we can visualize them, then we can pinpoint in which stages of growth a company is. If you score high on all three of them, then the company is going to grow. So, that's a myth that there is a plateau. No, you're growing or you're declining as a company. If you look at the compound effect, maybe you don't notice it now, but maybe there's a problem there. And that's why stage 2 is the time bomb. And now it sounds horrible. What do you mean by time bomb? And this is when you score low on one of those invisible forces. Time bomb means that maybe you don't even notice that you have a problem. But if you do nothing about it, there's going to be a serious issue. And that also means that you can still diffuse it if you know what to do and when. Then you can go up to stage 1, the growth. But when you have a problem with 2 invisible forces, that's the decline. That is going to be much more difficult to bring it back because you have a serious issue. And when you have a problem with all 3 of them, that's pretty much game over. That will be stage 4. And we have plenty of case studies to show that. And sometimes the problem is that a company is too big, too comfortable, and too slow. And they are too arrogant and they think, these new companies, they know nothing. We are big, we own the space. And I think Blockbuster is one of the prime examples that it's not like that. When Netflix approached them, they said, no, you are nothing. We are good. A few years later, they disappeared. They closed down. Netflix is Fortune 115 today.
Yes, I think we have many examples of that. Unfortunately, that complacence that led to demise, if you will, because there was an assumption that everything that had worked in the past and historically would continue to serve them, and we've learned in many different cases that that's not the case. You said something though that was really important. I thought, not recognizing that you have a problem. And I think that there's a lot of that now. And people are relying on methodologies and systems from 2018, 2019, as we find our way back out of, coronavirus and the pandemic and things like that. And they're not aware of the changes, fully aware of the changes that they might have to implement. So do you have any suggestions or any thoughts about how to take a different approach to identifying those problems or those trends that are emerging?
I think referring to solutions from the 2019 and 18, that's pretty optimistic, because I think more than 90% of companies buy and sell people solutions created in the 60s and 70s, even though the world completely changed. And yes, people are quite similar, but we are facing very different challenges than our great grandparents. We can ignore that fact, but if you look at the statistics, what kind of results those solutions are delivering, then it's pretty clear that something is wrong. But because a lot of companies are running on autopilot, and this is what we used last year, so you know what, I don't want hassle in my life, we do this again. And often the evaluation is based on how entertaining a trainer was rather than how valuable the program was, because you don't know that immediately. You find it out maybe 3 or 6 months later on. So this is the most important part. How can you make it more uncomplicated and practical? Because if something is too complex, people are not going to use it. They have enough problems. So for us, this is the most important part, that you get all 3 forces in one place. So we can save you a lot of time, money, and hassle. It's almost like a mindset X-ray that you can see. Are you growing or are you declining? Are you on track or are you just hoping for the best? Because what if you don't get the real feedback? What if there's a dominant leader who cannot tolerate negative news or mistakes? Then people are going to hide them. But that is going to come back. And maybe it's going to be too late.
And all of these things that you're talking about are addressed through the Growth Zone program. Is that
Exactly.
right? Yes, yes. So tell us a little bit about Growth Zone specifically and how that works.
So Growth Zone is a certification program. It's an ICF accredited program, and the participants learn how to measure, visualize, and optimize all three forces. So the goal is to bring science and practicality to this topic. And it's interesting that sometimes the companies are not ready for it, because what if you find something? Like you don't want to go to the dentist unless you really have to go. But regular checkups could save you a lot of hassle. So yes, it might be scary. But the reason why we talk about growth, because when you mention diversity and inclusion, that field is getting a bit weird, sometimes a bit too political, and then people are getting really sensitive about it for the wrong reasons sometimes. So we approach the same topic from a business perspective: growth, high performing teams, individuals, nothing to do with politics. I mean, as long as you have people, there are politics. But we focus on high performing teams, leadership, diversity and inclusion. Yes, that is part of it, definitely. But I think there are a lot of outdated and incomplete ideas in this field. Because when you mention the word intercultural, most people hear international. So when you talk about cultural intelligence, then they think, oh, we don't have an international team. We don't need it. Yes, you do. But their perception is their reality. So there's no point in arguing with that.
Yeah.
But are you interested in growing your company? Yes or no? That's kind of a binary question. You might think you don't have a problem, but maybe you do. I don't know. Do you want to check it? So let's make it more uncomplicated. That's the goal.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the beauty of it. I think that you're able to speak in a way that addresses an area that's important to them, and that changes the interpretation of what they're doing, basically. So
Exactly, because they can take the assessment. So we get back the results. We can see if you are growing or maybe not. And then we can break down the question. So we can see where you have a problem, how serious that is. We don't know what it is, but we can help you find it. We have all the tools to find it with you in partnership. And once we have that, then we can make it better. We can optimize it. Not until then.
yeah, yeah. And when you think about the questions that emerge, do you find that reveal, I'll call it, is something that is a surprise, or are you uncovering information that the team or the organization was unaware of?
I think it's both, because people are complex, and when you think that you know a lot about people, you have to realize every day that, oh wait, that was a surprise, that's something new. But that's why we have these probing questions, and nobody can argue with how you feel. Do you feel safe? Do you feel motivated? And your answer is going to be there. Anonymous, we don't know who that is, but we can see the range, we can see the average, and then we can have the probing question. And this is where, for example, the cultural intelligence is really important. Because let's say, do you feel that it's safe to take risk on your team? And maybe you score low or high. But then how about asking the question, what is your definition of risk?
Right. Yeah.
Let's look at your personality type. Introverted people take less risk. Extroverted ones are more comfortable with it. So it doesn't mean that your company is not great. Maybe you have a lot of introverted people, lots of engineers. Then we have to consider it as well. Or maybe if you do that in Sweden, then usually people don't do anything extreme. It's not like too much or not enough. It's just they're somewhere in the middle. We have to consider it as well. So a lot of assessments are very North American and Western European, but we add a layer of cultural intelligence to it because there's a lot of information there.
Yeah.
How you feel, that's up to you. But we can find out if that's a real problem, or maybe we can just modify it a little bit.
How you feel is up to you. And I think that that's the most important part. One size does not fit all.
No.
And we've got to have a container, hold a space for how everyone is impacted, how everyone is affected. We're going through questions now around the return to work. Some people are very comfortable, others are not. I won't even touch the vaccine issue in this conversation. Yeah. But people have all different feelings about that, and we have to honor those feelings, but at the same time, balance that with what we need for them to do to add value and to be a part of a high-performing team.
And I think you mentioned something really important, that we also have to make it two-sided. So we have to consider the feelings, yes, but also what do they have to do in order to feel motivated and feel safe? So usually we don't talk about the active participation. We just measure companies. Are you inclusive? Are you this and that? There are a lot of different surveys about employee engagement asking if they are engaged, but there's no question about, have you tried your best to get engaged? Have you tried your best to reach out to other people, to find purpose? It's almost like people are expecting to be included, but are you willing to unhide yourself? What if the company is inclusive, but you're still bringing your baggage with you from the other place? Or maybe you have a personal issue and you keep hiding yourself. The outcome is the same. So we focus on the other side as well, self-inclusion, the active participation. And not a lot of companies talk about that. But what do you do to feel engaged? Do you want somebody to babysit you? Do you want the freedom, but you don't want the responsibility? I mean, there should be a balance, because lots of people want the freedom of speech, for example. But if somebody says something they don't like, then, oh, how dare you? I cancel you. You can't do that. I sue you. Well, can you make it two-sided? What if your freedom was matched with the level of your inclusion? Is it a provocative idea?
Well, it depends on who you ask, I think. I don't find it provocative, but I do think that you have to set ground rules and you use the term expectations, so that people understand that that's part of the play, if you will. And that it's not personal. And, ideally, it doesn't stop them from being offended. Let me say that. But hopefully it will help them to navigate that situation a little bit differently and move away from being offended, with the intention of adding effectiveness and growing and adding value. So, yeah. And when you talk about that risk, there's such a continuum, from one person to the next. And some people are very open and some people are very guarded. So I think that this is magical almost, to be able to, to consider all of those positions and points of view. But the challenge, or the key, is bringing them all together to work together in a meaningful way.
Exactly. That's why we need to measure cognitive diversity as well. And that's the reason why that is the only layer of diversity that has proven benefit in terms of performance. But that's the difficult part. What happens when somebody disagrees with you? That's the dividing line between diversity and inclusion. Diversity is just the potential for success or disaster. It depends on how much you understand yourself and others. So this is our number one priority, to facilitate that conversation, as you said it. Knowing about things, fantastic. Being aware of things, very good. But how do you make it work? How do you contribute to creating psychological safety? You cannot be neutral. You're part of it. You're contributing to it, or you're destroying it. There's no middle ground. Just like in terms of growth, or you're growing or you're declining. There is no middle ground. So sometimes people want to step back. That's not my business. Yes, it is. You are part of it. So what do you do about that?
Yeah. I hear people say, I just want to go to work and return home and do my work and not get involved with the politics and all these other things. It's impossible to do in most cases. And so what you say is really important. We're all a part of it, right?
Yeah.
And we can't rely on our employer or our team leader or whomever, anyone else, to create that space for us and make it so. We've got to participate in it, because how we show up in that space is part of what defines the space. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. Because even not doing anything is a decision. Turning a blind eye to something is about acknowledging it, accepting it. So clearly you contributed to something bad that you don't agree with. And just because it doesn't affect you now, it doesn't mean it's not going to. It's almost like a cultural infection. If you don't treat it immediately, it might spread too much and it might be too late.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to measure these things. That is everything all right? Or maybe there's something wrong. Then do it now. Look at it as an infection. It's almost like a corporate diabetes, the silent killer, that you don't see the symptoms for long. But when you do, then it might be too late. And for example, political correctness is part of it. That is the symptom of the lack of psychological safety. If you have to be always politically correct and we cannot bring up difficult topics, nothing is going to change. Then what's the alternative? That I'm just going to assume something. And usually assumptions are not positive.
Right.
Because we are wired for negativity. It's very primal. And then I'm going to discuss it with people like me, homophilic diversity. We like and trust people who are similar to us. Then we are going to amplify this bubble. So I think I'm right. And we are just widening the gap. That's not helping anyone. So our approach is the exact opposite. Let's build a common ground. And then we can learn how to make the most of the differences. Instead of pointing out statistically average differences that usually don't even apply on individual level. And here I'm referring to international training, because a lot of cultural intelligence trainings are based on countries, nationalities. But if somebody invested in a cultural intelligence training and they learned about countries only, they should ask for a refund. That was international training, part of it, but that's a tiny, tiny fraction. For global mobility, that makes a lot of sense. You have to learn about what people are used to. But pretending that you can create a high-performing team using that approach, that has nothing to do with science. Nothing. If somebody's up to date in their field, they know that exactly.
Yeah. You said that it's a silent killer, and sometimes it's not so silent. I think of situations, culturally diverse or otherwise, where people will say, oh, John is a great engineer. He does excellent work. We can rely on him to do this, this, and this. He's really hard to work with, and you can't talk to him at this time of day and all these kinds of things. So all of these parameters, right? But no one is willing or able to unpack that so that this person can, be a greater contributor, because it's not as much about the work that he does, but how he integrates and works with the team as a whole. And so being able to look at this holistically as opposed to creating all of these little pockets is really meaningful.
I would approach it from a slightly different angle as well. That, for example, when we break down the psychological safety into 4 categories, collaboration is one of those. And for example, there's a question about how much collaboration do you need? Because maybe if John is an engineer, then he doesn't really have to collaborate. So why would we push John to be social, to work with other people when maybe it is not needed? So I'm not saying that people skills are not important, but in some professions, they are less important. And there's no point in training everybody up to a mediocre level. It's about understanding that they need to be alone. That's how they recharge. That's how they perform. So sometimes the good intention and the common sense can backfire. Let's have an open office so everybody can socialize. Fantastic. You like it. But half of the people are not going to like it. They need privacy. Yeah. That's what they need. Just how much you need interaction, that's how much they need to be alone. It's not optional. That's why we need to understand those underlying values and drivers. And once we do that, then we know exactly how to motivate those people, how to create that environment around them. Because the highest level of psychological safety is not about doing something extra, but it's about removing the threats to psychological safety. Just like the highest level of growth is often about getting rid of the limiting beliefs and all the problems that are holding you back.
Yeah. Understood. And so that privacy, as you using that example, is very important for people, but just from the standpoint of being able to, interact at a level that supports the work that you're doing, just to get that to a manageable place.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of really supportive comments coming in. How you show up in the space is what defines the space. And, being comfortable with uncomfortable. So acknowledgement for all the things we're talking about, which is great. I would invite anyone listening to also ask a question. We have a few minutes left before we adjourn today. So if you have a question for myself or for Csaba, please feel free to chat it in, and we'll be happy to address it. So when you think about this, going back to the growth zone, what do you think is the greatest challenge in getting buy-in?
Fear. So, for example, I was talking to a company. They are pretty big. They have more than 60,000 employees. And they also have a diversity and inclusion department. So it looks like they take it seriously. But when we introduced this, the psychological safety, they said, no. But what if we find something? I said, but you're okay with diversity and inclusion. Yes, that's okay. But psychological safety, that's not. I said, it's almost like a cognitive dissonance. We talk about the same thing, because if you score high on psychological safety, your company is inclusive. There's no shortcut there. But
Yeah.
somehow there's a different definition there for some reason.
Yeah.
So I think it's the fear that they don't want to find something.
It's so interesting. Two short words that really stand in between, the things that we're talking about today at an optimal level, functioning at optimal level, and the not doing, are fear and trust, right? And without those two things, it's really difficult to overcome and get even to a point of being able to begin to start to do this work. And so from the standpoint of a starting place, we always want the senior leadership to buy in and to sanction a program. But do you find value in developing ambassadors, if you will, in different parts or lower levels of the company or different parts of the organization for more of a grassroots or a bottom-up approach?
Definitely, because everybody is important. However, the decisions are made on the top. So I think a lot of people realize that they don't want to live in fear. They don't want to go to work and just be scared of what happens. I don't know who's in charge today. I don't know what the standards are today, because it depends on the leader, on the shift. A lot of companies are like this. So I'm pretty sure they know that. So the senior management need to understand that this is not about a test that you can fail and then somebody is going to punish you for it. No, it's a diagnostic tool. Find out what's going on in your company. Is it healthy or is it not? It's almost like finding that little tumor in your company. We can deal with it. But if you don't know it's there, it's going to spread and it might be too late. So maybe it's scary. But if we think long term, I think that is much more scary. And we can talk about the hierarchy of pain. Then you choose this one. It's not against you, it's for you.
Yeah. Going back to that dental example you used earlier, it's not pleasant, but it's something we all need to do, right?
Exactly.
Well, I don't see any questions coming in, but I do continue to see very positive comments. So I'm glad that people are finding benefit. And I hope that they will continue to explore ICQ Global, the Growth Zone, and all the other things that you have pulled together to help us learn more about ourselves and each other and work more effectively together. So thank you so much for exploring this topic with me today. I invite you to make any final comments or any final contributions you'd like to leave us with.
Thank you so much for inviting me. The best advice is to practice this, because when I was building the system and I was doing my research, I had to realize where I made a mistake. So I can talk about psychological safety, but if I'm not signaling it, and then you know me, that I don't look the most adorable person all the time. Sometimes I look grumpy or too serious. So I'm not signaling that, yes, you can come to me. Yes, you can come up with an idea, or you can tell me something is wrong. So I have to push myself, and let's be honest, we are the best case study, and that makes us credible. So we can start small on an individual level, at home or at work.
Yeah. Really good advice. And I appreciate the self-deprecating humor. You're certainly never grumpy.
Sometimes.
Oh, I haven't experienced that. So, well, thank you so much, everyone. This has been a great conversation. This is our second of many. We'll continue to have this conversation to cast a wider net and help bring people into the tent, because I do believe that once we allow ourselves to be open and give others permission to share and exchange, we can really get to a higher level of performance. So, yeah. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.